this 30-minute race will not, for GT4s, involve pit stops. So this might be the first GT4 race I've ever seen that doesn't. Seb Hopkins starts on pole in his Porsche Cayman. Freddie Tomlinson, son of Lawrence, the boss of Ginetta, in a brand new build Ginetta G56. David Vresky in a Mercedes AMG with Alia College teammate alongside. And Stephen Walton makes it 3 Mercedes in a clump ahead of the McLaren of Danny Henry. Well, Danny lines up in 6th position ahead of the similar car of David Foster. Similar car, very different liveries. Craig Wilkins in the Toyota GR Supra is in 8th place ahead of Greg Evans Ginetta and the Porsche Cayman of race director Peter Daly. If he infringes, does he take himself to his own office and give himself a jolly good telling off? No, this has a different race director. Well, there are the 16 cars that will be competing in 3 different classes: for current cars, for classic cars, which is sort of 2010, 11, 12, and for cup cars. So the GT4 formula is a less highly developed version of these road-going supercars than in GT3, and the premise there being that this is where drivers, engineers and teams cut their teeth, and then the ambition is to move up to better, bigger, faster, more powerful GT3 cars, and that's certainly the class in national racing, like the British GT Championship, and international racing as well. So GT4 is proving to be as successful as GT3 and has introduced not only different manufacturers, but a whole range, a whole new generation of drivers and teams and engineers to GT sports car racing. Martin Haven and Alistair Douglas waiting to talk you through this race. And Alistair, a GT race without pit stops, well, I can't remember the last time I've talked about one of those.
Yeah, it's very unusual, especially where some of the cars are actually familiar to us who work or watch British GT racing. Certainly the car on pole position, Seb Hopkins, a current driver in British GT3 in his GT4, sorry, in his GT4 car. So that's a car we see frequently, and Freddie Tomlinson also racing in the Ginetta in GT4. As he was telling us yesterday, this is a brand new build car, so not the one he's been using, but yeah, very unusual, and great to see this effort to keep GT4s in the limelight, even though they're now no longer homologated and racing in the current series.
Yeah, and as it used to be the expression, there's nothing as old as last year's racing car, and I certainly think that Enzo Ferrari was very much espoused to that. Who else goes and cuts up an entire generation of Formula One cars other than Enzo to stop them falling into private hands? But nowadays, never sell an old race car, just put it in the garage, go and buy a new one. It'll be worth more the longer you keep it in the garage. That is a fact of life. And so these current GT4 cars, and those that are, again, remarkably near current. And how near current? What's the oldest car in the field? The oldest car in the field is 9 years old. So that is the oldest car in this field, and the newest car is possibly not even 9 days old. That's the car on the outside the front row, the all-white car as you see it here, the Ginetta G56 of Freddie Tomlinson, whose dad Lawrence bought Ginetta when it was just about to expire. Originally started in the 60s by the Walcott brothers, built their cars in the east of England, and you'll see some of those in historic GT racing as well later in the 60s. And Ginetta now based up in Yorkshire. Proud Yorkshireman Lawrence Tomlinson. Team LNT is running the car. Their traditional white with orange and grey. That marks out the car on the outside of the front row, but it's Seb Hopkins in his regular weekend weapon who is the man who will start this race on pole position. Lights are out on the safety car, so we are about to start racing. 30 minutes ahead of them. The Silverstone Grand Prix circuit is their playground. Nice 2x2 formation as they roll gently up towards the start line, waiting for the lights to change. The field of GT4 cars is ready to go. The lights go green, away we go. Seb Hopkins and Freddie Tomlinson from the front row of the grid. Tomlinson making a slightly quiet start, and David Fresky in the Mercedes from third on the grid immediately leaps ahead of him. Stephen Walton in the yellow and black Mercedes up to fourth place, but the Ginetta driver looking to go the long way round the outside and cut back on the inside in the loop as he moves back into second place. But it is Seb Hopkins in his regular mount, the Porsche, that leaves a spinner behind, and that is one of our, and that's our other Ginetta, that's the G55 car, and that is seems to have escaped without damage. Greg Evans.
That's the Stephen Walton Mercedes, I think.
I beg your pardon, yes.
Very similar colours, yes.
Especially on our monitors.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the first of the Mercedes actually still battling with Freddie Tomlinson, but it's nice to see two young pretenders, you might call them, very junior drivers, both teenagers. Seb Hopkins, the 65 Cayman 718, and Freddie Tomlinson in the 56 Ginetta G56, and he's being challenged by David Vresky in the Mercedes, which coming into Copse Corner almost side by side there, but Vresky had to give best because Tomlinson had the racing line as they now come up the hill towards Maggots Curve and then into the sweepers at Beckett's, the right, left and right. Great camera shots can be found there, and the rest of the field streaming through. But Freddie Tomlinson it is who still holds that second place, looks to have put a couple of car lengths between himself and the Mercedes.
Yeah, really used the Nimble Ginetta chassis just to creep away from the Mercedes there, but then the big AMG GT4 will open its lungs and start to haul him in down the straight. And the balance of performance that is defined for these GT4 cars, as with GT3, it doesn't limit their top speed, it doesn't limit their braking, it doesn't limit their power or their weight. What it does do is balance their overall lap time. Now, they might make their speed around the circuit in very different ways. You might get a car that is better in the slower stuff, a car that is better in the quicker stuff, but the idea behind the balance of performance is that the potential of all the cars over a lap will be as close to identical as possible, and that means that the racing between very different looking and sounding cars will be very close. The Porsche out front with the engine behind the driver, the Ginetta here and the Mercedes both still in the old style GT mould with the engine in front of the driver. So very different chassis dynamics, very different engines indeed, engine sizes, engine formats, engine capacities. And the idea is that you can bring just about anything, have it homologated and hopefully be able to run competitively. Well, here is just a cold tyre spin. You're right, it was Stephen Walton who looped around out of, ironically enough, not the loop, into the loop or through the loop, and dropped down to the tail of the field. Where's he got to? He is currently running at the back of the field trying to make up some lost ground.
So the leader, Seb Hopkins, comes into Copse Corner, and still this great battle going on because although Freddie Tomlinson is still ahead and still got a couple of car lengths at least over the Mercedes, certainly David Vresky is not letting him go, and Vresky has the potentially, if he can catch up, the help of his teammate Koloch just behind, coming in the second of the Mercedes, although there is a bit of a gap between those two as they come through Beckett's and out onto the Hanger Straight once again. That wonderful timeless long shot up the Hanger Straight towards Chapel Curve as they come down towards Stowe Corner. Seb Hopkins turns in. He seems to have the measure at the moment of the Ginetta of Freddie Tomlinson, who is still battling with Vresky in third place. There is the car that spun on the first lap at the loop, Stephen Walton in the third of the AMG Mercedes GT4 cars, and they're a current car, of course, still racing in GT4 today.
Yeah, he's at the tail, well, not quite at the tail of the field now, has passed one of the Astons. That is the Stratton Motorsport car, Richard Taffender, closing in on a couple more. The Aston Martin GT4s, dating back to between 2011 and 2016. So Stephen Walton on the comeback trail, had made a good start, looked like he was attacking potentially for third place, but looped it around out of fourth. and right to the tail of the field. Now, unfortunately, first lap is a very poor time to spin because everybody is so close that the entire field goes by you as you're trying to figure out which way is the safest way to get back on track. Now, as the leader pulls away, does look a little bit as though David Vresky in the third placed Mercedes is just dropping away from Freddie Tomlinson in the white Ginetta in second. There is Vresky, car number 38. Alia Kolic in fourth place, the second of the Bagheera run trio of Mercedes-AMG GT4s, not able to keep pace with them either, but just about safe from the first of the McLaren 570s, and that is Danny Henry in fifth position, with David Foster in sixth place. Now again, that is where they started. In fact, they started sixth and seventh, so they started in those positions with each in front of the, or one in front of the other as they remain. The difference being that the Walton Mercedes was just ahead of them on the grid.
And just to prove that not only do we have a fantastic range of cars and marks here at the Classic at Silverstone this year, Alia Kolic in the 29 car we're looking at now is from the Seychelles. I'm sure I've ever commentated on a Seychelles racing driver before.
No, so much so that I'm not even sure if you're Seychellian. So it's yes, I suppose Seychellian. However, Alia, that's another question for Alia Kolic. And interestingly, the team that's running it, the Bagheera Racing team, do build their own small sports prototypes, but they don't build GT cars, so another string to their bow, as so many racing teams do, find other ways of keeping their mechanics out of trouble and off street corners. Because otherwise, if they're left to their own devices, mechanics are a bit of an odd bunch, so always best to keep them employed running cars. It's what they do best. Well, there's the better of the two McLarens at the moment, and that is Danny Henry, David Foster behind him, so both of them in a 570S GT4. Obviously, as you can see, very different liveries run by different teams. Danny Henry's run by Team Rocket RJN. RJN is Bob Neville's team. Rocket is Jenson Button's team, and they came together 3 or 4 years ago now to run GT cars together.
And in fact, the Team Rocket RJN were running Michael O'Brien, who you might remember was the winner of our first race this weekend, and very emotional too. Michael O'Brien cut his teeth in modern GT racing in a McLaren GT4 as a works McLaren driver, and he's moved up into GT3. The second of the McLaren GT4s, that of the sort of grey, white and red livery, the number 111 of David Foster, run by Balfe Motorsport. Sean Balfe, we will see, I can't remember whether we've seen him already. I think we have, haven't we, in the Tony Dron race, but we'll certainly see him again. Sean Balfe, a racer in his own right, but Team Balfe Motorsport running this McLaren GT4, and that is running in...
Yeah, he's running in sixth place. He's got company from behind as well, actually. And this is a car that I don't think we even mentioned really in qualifying, apart from once or twice, the rather more upright red, white and black car, predominantly white with sort of red flashes and black pattern on it in a World War I battlefield or a battleship disruptive pattern. Car number 8, now with a more prominent number 8 on the door, so the timekeepers have had a word. We were struggling to see yesterday, unless the car came towards you, you could read the 8 on the windscreen. The numbers were subtly camouflaged on the C pillars, the pillar at the back of the car. Now they're more available to timekeepers. It's the Toyota GR Supra GT4, so this is the latest GT4 car from Toyota.
And I suspect that might be the car, or certainly a sister car to the car that runs in British GT, because it's showing the British GT Championship sponsor on the flash across the windscreen. Yeah. So that may well be the car that's used in the current series.
I would think very likely to be run by Scott Sport here. What was hard about that to say for Craig Wilkins? So Craig, again, with plenty of GT racing experience under his belt, all over the back of the McLaren, trying to find a way through. And again, look at that, two very, very different cars. Again, the Supra, front engine, rear wheel drive, but much more of a fast performance coupe, whereas the McLaren is a real knocking on the door of hypercar style car, very low slung, very driver focused, mid-engined, a real road supercar. And in road terms, a Toyota Supra of any generation would probably really struggle to show much to a McLaren 570, and that's the joy of balance and performance. You get two very different looking cars with utterly different concepts, and here they are, inches apart, and each could easily take the upper hand. It all depends on what the team and driver can do. Balance and performance is to try and give everybody the best chance, whatever weapon they choose in the fight. So 111 just hanging on there in front, David Foster in the grey and white, and I guess that sort of maroony red McLaren, but really feeling the pressure from the Toyota behind.
A good battle this, and as you say, very different cars, but very well matched with this balance of performance that is used in GT racing to keep the racing very close. And the two McLarens quite close together, but that Supra looks like it's going to have a go down the hanger straight. No, there's no room there, so switches to the outside. That's a long way round, but there is an opportunity to cut back at Stowe Corner if he drops off the back of the McLaren and tries to go tight, but the McLaren doesn't give him the chance to do that. So not able to get through at Stowe, but now into the slightly different configuration of Club Corner, a faster left into the right, but the Supra runs wide, running out now onto the Hamilton straight, and that little tiny mistake there at Club has lost about half a car length for Craig Wilkins in the number 8 red, white and black Supra, chasing down the 111 McLaren of David Foster as they come now into Farm and up to Village. Another opportunity here for Craig Wilkins. He's going to go wide. Will he cut back and try and come alongside? No, hasn't got the opportunity to do that, but now he's closing up, try and perhaps get a move done at the end of the Wellington Straight.
I wonder in 20 years time when people talk about GR on Toyotas. GR comes from Gazoo Racing, which was originally the racing arm that ran Toyotas and still does, but GR has now become a sort of high-performance brand, and you think of things like RS on a Ford, or AMG on a Mercedes, or Quattro on an Audi. You know, it's become almost a high-performance brand of its own. It hasn't quite yet been spun off to manufacturing distinct cars, but like an Escort or an Escort RS, the owner knows the difference. So we've already got the GR Yaris, we've got the GR Supra, and it's clearly going to be used by Toyota in the future, at least in the near future, to denote a very high performance version of its cars. So yeah, that's definitely the way the brand is going, and the GR Supra here, still all over the back of the McLaren. And actually, what's interesting is that Danny Henry in the other McLaren, far from getting away, they are actually just marginally closing on him. So the other McLaren 570S just in front of this shot is not as far ahead as it was, despite the fact that the Supra is all over the back of David Foster's McLaren. They're keeping the speed up. Again, coming down into Stowe, trying to force Foster to defend on the inside all the way through and then run out wide. But instead, this time the Toyota carries the speed around the outside, exactly as you said might be possible on the previous lap. This time he really got it done, forced the McLaren onto the dirty side of the track. The McLaren had to brake earlier for Stowe. The Toyota was on the grippy side, kept the speed up and swept through. That was a well thought out move, and it does actually look as though the Toyota has got a little bit more pace as the race progresses. So Craig Wilkins moves up and is now immediately, having hunted down and passed one McLaren, hunting down and trying to pass another McLaren.
He'll be enjoying it though. That's what racing's all about. But you're right, as soon as he got past, he closed up on the...
and that might have undone all of that hard work. And the rocket car gets nerfed out, so unfortunately just nudged in the braking area. David Henry couldn't get the car stopped, and now he does come back on in front of the Toyota. And actually I think possibly that was, I realise I've made a monumental error there. I will let him have the place back, and of course in all the out fumbling, then the beneficiary was the other McLaren. So that's not the way exactly I think that Craig Wilkins was expecting that to go. David Foster gets back past Craig Wilkins and ahead of the other McLaren of Danny Henry. So Henry again under attack now as they come past us and down the old pit straight, the classic pit straight, past the Heritage pits. And he's again looking for a way past the McLaren, as he has been pretty much all this race. 15 minutes remain of this 30 minutes encounter, so we are seconds away from the halfway mark, and still the race continues. Out front is still our race leader, so Seb Hopkins now with a 5.5 second nearly advantage over Freddie Tomlinson. David Vresky in third, Alia Kolic in fourth. And then this is the three-way battle for fifth. McLaren and Toyota.
Coming down the Hangar Straight, will the Toyota go to the outside? No, he sticks to the inside, then cuts to the outside, trying to find a way around. He's going to do the same thing, isn't he? He's going to go all the way around the outside and try and stay ahead, but doesn't manage to do it this time. But another opportunity perhaps on braking. It's a little bit tight into the tight left and right at club corner, but a good run from here onto the Hamilton Straight opens up opportunities at the top of the hill, at perhaps at Abbey Curve, or even into Village after you've gone through these two fast sweepers now. But these two cars are, and the McLarens and the Toyota, are amazingly closely matched. Just very, very little between them. And here goes Wilkins on the outside at Village, but that's a long way round. And by the time he gets to the exit of the corner, Danny Henry is able to take the inside line and out through Aintree onto the Wellington Straight.
And David Foster in the other McLaren has absolutely cleared off, hasn't he, having been passed by the Toyota. The Toyota then a lap ago, just back at the corner, you can see, ran into the back of Danny Henry's white McLaren, slowed them both down, and David Foster, as a result, has cleared off. He was actually bringing the Supra back up towards this white McLaren with the wild boar on the side of Danny Henry when he was being attacked by Craig Wilkins in the Toyota. But now free of that, he is absolutely clearing off. Nothing between Danny Henry and Craig Wilkins, just 2/3 of a second, not even 2/3 of a second, more like 1/4 of a second. So just about a car length between them. It does seem that Craig Wilkins has got a lot of confidence in running outside on the outside line with the Toyota, and again squeezes back past the McLaren as they go up the hill through Maggots and into Beckett's.
The Toyota looked a little bit wide at Copse there, didn't it? Difficult to see from our camera angle, but it looked as though he was off the track there, so that might be a questionable move from the Toyota, but we'll wait and see. Peter Daly's racing at the moment, as you say. He's the normal clerk of the course, or race director, to give him his correct
would be
title.
for British GT.
British
so
GT,
yes,
yeah.
so some of these who he is racing against, he may have to be admonishing, or previously has admonished this season for their driving.
There is Peter Daly, number 66, in the Porsche Cayman Club Sport, run by Team Parker Racing. So effectively a teammate to the leader, Seb Hopkins.
Not his daily driver. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, I'll stop.
Yeah.
We'll
brush over that one.
Well, it's always good actually for racers to become officials, because they sort of understand it, don't they? And good that Peter Daly is. I mean, great fun for him to be back out as well, and you know, doing what he's administering or ruling over every other race weekend that he goes to. And he is closing up on David Walton in front of him in that Stephen Walter, beg your pardon, in the Mercedes, and just in front of him is that Greg Evans? It is. No, it's not. That's the Aston, isn't it? So who's that in front of him? That is the Griffin Aston. Yeah, Chris Griffin. Is that 35 or 2? No, it's 247. Is it Chris Griffin with the sort of factory Aston Dayglow limey greeny highlights of a couple of seasons ago. So the yellow and black Mercedes recovering. Stephen Walton continues to recover from his spin. He's up to 10th place now. But that car could well have been a podium contender had things gone otherwise for him. This is a first of 2 races for these cars, so he'll hope to have a slightly better race tomorrow afternoon.
And getting away now, having got past those 2 battling cars behind him, the Aston and the Porsche. Stephen Walton is starting to stretch the legs of the Mercedes and up into 10th place. His next target will be the Lotus Evora, a car we saw in GT4 for a number of years, driven by one of the development drivers for Lotus, Gavin Kershaw, who took one or two successes with the car, but it was always very frustrating doing the pit lane commentary for GTs. And the Lotus would do really well, and then there'd be some problem. It wasn't always the car, I have to say. It was sometimes he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yes, my memories of that is he tended to be occasional mechanical retirements, but more, if he didn't have bad luck, he wouldn't have had any at all.
And such a nice team as well. Gavin and his dad would be helping, and it was effectively a Lotus entry, but run under their direction, and good to see.
It wasn't even a skunk, it wasn't even sort of Lotus approved, it wasn't a skunk works, it was just genuinely a Lotus employee out racing what he liked best, a Lotus.
That's right. And we're looking again at Seb Hopkins now, the leader of the race, with 9 and a bit minutes to go in his current GT4, raced in British GT, GT4 Cayman 718 Porsche, coming through the Beckett's complex. Right, left and right. I was rather surprised to watch some old pictures of racing here at Silverstone and realising how long we've had that Beckett's complex, because I recall the old Beckett's corner very well indeed, and then it was changed to this new complex. I thought it was only a couple of years ago, well, not really, but 10 or 12 years ago, but I think it was over 20 years ago now. We've enjoyed the new Beckett's complex.
And how long has it been since there was a bridge bend on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit? That does seem, actually that seems like half a lifetime ago. Now you walk through it, it's part of the main infield where the main stage is. There'll be, you know, food, drinks and displays there, and you walk down it, and probably half the people who are here this weekend don't realise that that was one of the most daunting corners in Grand Prix racing for 2 decades.
It does have, the walls of the circuit now have plaques on them. People can buy a plaque and put it on there, and there's also a questionable mural of Lewis Hamilton. The last time I walked through it, may have gone now, I don't know, but I looked at it and thought, yeah, I don't think I would be happy if I was Lewis with that picture, but that's a bit ungracious to the artist perhaps. But yeah, Silverstone have made a thing of Bridge Corner, and absolutely correctly, because it was a daunting corner. Watched the WEC from there many years ago now, when the Peugeots were running. We'll see those cars later on, won't we? And it was just staggering how quick they went through the bridge corner.
Absolutely. A high downforce car in bridge was just a sight to see. What it must have been like to the drivers just beggars belief, because you could barely believe the speed of approach of a Formula One car in the 90s, that they would ever do anything other than just pile headlong into the gravel, and yet they all made it round. It was, an absolutely insane corner. But there are still so many challenges of the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, and for modern racing cars and the most ancient alike. I mean, we've kind of traversed the entire century, haven't we, with the BRDC 500, cars nearly 100 years old, all in their 90s, comfortably into their 90s, and some of these cars, the oldest of these cars, not yet a decade old. So we've traversed an entire century of sports car racing, from the BRDC 500 to the GT4 Classic Challenge here. It's a pretty all-encompassing range of ages. Plenty of sports car racing coming up throughout the weekend as well. We've got lots of cars from the 60s here. There's a real 60s vibe here, I think, at the Classic this year. Not just me in my flared trousers and paisley shirt, but we've got 60s Grand Prix cars, 60s touring cars, 60s GT cars and sports races as well. Plenty from all the other decades. There's a definite swinging 60s feel. Of course, that was when really customers and motor racing, it just sort of exploded. You could buy cars from manufacturers for single-seater racing, for GT racing. There is the Lotus, and a great opportunity to see a small car with a lot of extra add-ons for GT4 racing. A little bit like the KTM Crossbow. Very small, simple, basic, simplistic car that needed a lot added to it to bring it up to full GT4 speed.
A good colour scheme on that as well. It's not quite the right green for Lotus, but absolutely along the lines of Colin Chapman's green with the yellow stripes that we will see in cars racing later on.
Needs yellow wheels, boys, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Come on, yellow wheels.
Wobbly wheels.
I know they're not wobblies, but yellow wheels. Just it's a hell of a green. I do love that colour.
Yeah, it is, and it's well, it's a metallic sort of colour, isn't it? It looks great in the sunshine here at Silverstone. And I was just musing before we came to the Lotus. We were watching the Aston Martin. You were talking about all the years from pre-war. There aren't many marques that had a car in that pre-war race that have got a car in this race, and Aston Martin is one of them.
Now we could also have a Bentley.
Yes,
Bentley is still around and about, but you're absolutely right. That's a really strong shout, of course. Yes, who's represented most? Well, there's certainly no Delahaye's in this. There aren't any Fraser Nashes, but we do have Aston Martins, as we did have in our pre-war sports car race. Here's Richard Taffender in the GT4,
and that car run, as you can read, run by Stratton Motorsport on the front corners. That Stratton also run the Lotus as well. They've got both cars running today, and so they're from the east of England. Running Richard Taffender in the Aston Martin and John Dixon in the Lotus Evora. And if you back to this battle again, it's still going on. McLaren versus Toyota. And
this is a little bit Fraser Nash with a huge Bugatti behind it that we were enjoying in the BRDC 500 cars a century ago, and it's the same deal, isn't it? Small, light, purpose-built sports car versus much bigger, more comfortable, fast road car, if you like. But again, here comes the Toyota. He's got the outside line. Well done by the crew for picking this up at just the right moment. And again, we see that pass around the outside. Deja vu all over again. 3 minutes and 20 seconds to go, so there'll be a couple more laps, but the Toyota has finally made it back past the McLaren. Did he pass, what, 4 or 5 laps ago now, probably?
A good move there from the Toyota, and Craig Wilkins at the wheel, up towards Abbey and Farm, through the left, and then it'll be into the tight right. But he's made enough ground, hasn't he? He's well ahead now of the McLaren, so he's not really going to be under pressure as they come into the tighter section of the circuit through Village and the Loop, where perhaps the McLaren is a little bit of an advantage. But going back to your description of these two cars, they're both GT cars because they're in the GT4 category, but GT stands for Grand Tourer. Now, you wouldn't get many bags in the back of the McLaren, would you? Or
no.
the front of the McLaren, my apologies, of course, because it's a mid-engine car.
Yes, you get none in the front of the Toyota either, but no, you're absolutely right. No, it's more of a supercar, but again, it's a fairly broad church. And actually, I think that's a great thing because, I'm a fan of sports cars of whatever age, really, really a big fan of sports cars, and I love the variety. And that's and modern sports car racing still gives you that. Modern single-seater racing, for reasons that we all understand, predominantly to do with it not being extinct through the paucity of budget, has become single-make Formula racing. But GTs and sports car racing, that's run what you brung. You bring it, we'll balance it, you can race it. Engine in the front, middle, back, upstairs, downstairs, don't care. Comfortable saloon car, hypercar, we'll make them all work. And that's fantastic because it opens up the opportunities for drivers to race so many different cars. And we've got all sorts of different takes on what might be a high-performance road car here. You've got the Porsche with the engine in the back. You've got the Aston Martin right behind with the engine in the front. So you've got centre rear mounted, you've got rear mounted engines, and you've got front mounted engines. They all go about it in a different way. What they have in common, I think, predominantly, is that they'll all put a smile on your face.
Indeed they will, and somebody who's put a smile on our face for many years as a works Aston Martin driver since 2005 is the Darren Turner, who was racing in the pre-war race this weekend. He loves racing that car of Jonathan Luckman, but Darren Turner has won countless races in Aston Martins, Le Mans particularly, and Martin will remember them all, I'm sure. I think he's won in class 3 times in the 24-hour race at Le Mans. Johnny Adam, also a Le Mans racer, but well remembered in British GT and Aston Martins, but who could forget Johnny Adams' fantastic drive to win the class, the the GT Pro class in the Le Mans 24 Hours a few years ago, in the latest generation of Aston Martin, not the one we're seeing here, the earlier car.
Exactly right. Well, final lap, final time down the Hangar Straight. Time is running out, and our race leader, Seb Hopkins, from pole position, will be heading towards the checkered flag as he sweeps into Stowe for the final time. Coming onto the Hangar Straight behind him was Freddie Tomlinson in the second place, Ginetta. David Freschi still third in his Mercedes. So three very different manufacturers. The Stuttgart Army out front, the tiny boutique manufacturer from Yorkshire in second, and another German dominant force in third. But it is victory from pole position from Seb Hopkins. He was the fastest man in qualifying by a measure, and takes victory from the man who started alongside him on the grid, Freddie Tomlinson, in the brand new build Ginetta G56, the latest of Ginetta's. And in third place, David Freschi taking the honours and the final step on the podium in the Bagheera Racing Run Mercedes AMG GT4, the younger brother of the big fire-breathing Merc. And talking of Merc, who was due to be these cars racing, or not these actual cars, but similar cars racing in the DTM at the Nürburgring this weekend. Guess what happened? It's August, high summer. Yep, too much rain and too much fog. They have been unable to qualify. So most of the day spent arguing about how they're going to set a grid for some of the races at the Nordschleife. So we're in much better weather conditions here at Silverstone. Another beautiful sunny autumn day, late summer day here in August at the Classic. And Seb Hopkins will certainly have enjoyed that. Pretty much untroubled after the first few corners of lap one. And the car that was the fastest in qualifying did not overplay its hand. It was just as quick in the race. Freddie Tomlinson and the Team LNT crew, I'm pretty sure, will be happy with second place. It was a very good showing for that car in its first outing as a race car. And David Freschi in third, ahead of teammate Alia Kolic. Craig Wilkins eventually getting up to fifth position in that GR Supra. There he is. Now, we didn't see he and David Foster getting ahead of Danny Henry, but that is what happened. Danny Henry sort of escaped them both, and then they both repassed him. So Danny Henry dropping down to 7th place. In 8th place, Greg Evans, car number 30, his Ginetta G55. In 9th place was Stephen Walton. We saw a fair bit of him earlier in the race in his Mercedes AMG GT4 as he spun early and came back through the order. Car number 69, Are You in Trouble 96. 69 finishing in 9th place, and in 10th place is car number 35, or was car number 35 of John Dixon, the Stratton Motorsport Lotus. Well, this is where it all sort of went wrong. The Toyota having just passed the grey and white McLaren, outbraked itself. The McLaren got through after contact between the Toyota and the predominantly white McLaren of Danny Henry. And Toyota driver Craig Wilkins giving the spot back before then fighting back hard. Very good result for the GR Supra. So still a relatively new car compared to the knowledge that's gone into things like the Porsche Cayman and the McLaren 570s. And there is the other Porsche that was in the race. So signature on the licence for Peter Daly. I don't think the clerk of the course or the stewards will have much to say to him other than well done, you enjoyed yourself and kept your nose clean. And most importantly of all, by the way, to race directors, you stayed off our grass. They twitch about their grass, most race directors.
We've got some more cars.
Well, there is your race winner, Seb Hopkins. And down among them, Bryn Lucas will be trying to nail jelly to the ceiling and organise the podium. Seb Hopkins not unaware of what happens on the podium with his season so far. He's been having a pretty decent time of it. We'll be back in action in this car when British GT picks up after the break. Alistair Douglas, what's the next British GT round? I'm going to put you on the spot now. Can you remember off the top of your head? Because I have no clue.
Where haven't we been yet? We've
Brands?
got Donington to come. Brands possibly, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I really was
one
on
of
the
them.
spot.
No, I knew you weren't, but I thought you might know.
Too many races in the season to remember what order they come in.
There's no such thing as too many races. Just not enough brain cells for us to keep up. Seb Hopkins, the winner from Freddie Tomlinson. Apologies for that. David Freschi, Alia Kolic, third and fourth in the Mercedes, ahead of Craig Wilkins in the Toyota. And David Foster and Danny Henry 6th and 7th in their McLarens. The G55 Ginetta of Greg Evans was in 8th place. Stephen Walter recovered from stone last and facing in the wrong direction to round out 9th place ahead of John Dixon's Lotus. And the current class won by Hopkins, the Cup class won by Evans, and the top classic in 11th place was Chris Griffin's Aston Martin GT4. So from the ancient with our pre-war grid of sports cars to the most up-to-date with GT4, one of the newest sports car formats, and cars here that were all within a decade of production, some absolutely brand new. Spin early on left Stephen Walton with a lot of work to do and really denied him any shot at a podium. But then a mid-race battle, fascinating, between the McLarens and the Toyotas as our race leader Seb Hopkins raced away. The Toyota Craig Wilkins was big and brave around the outside at Stowe, made up ground there, and then got into the back of Danny Henry's car. They both slowed down. Craig Wilkins would recover to finish not too far off the podium, but there was never much of a challenge for Seb Hopkins. The Toyota, though, coming back at the McLaren again, brave around the outside at Stowe Corner, is still a good way to win a spot. And out front by a country mile is a great way to win a race. Seb Hopkins triumphant in the GT4 Classic Silverstone Challenge.